Hello and welcome back to Planet 40k. We've got another one of those Necron Forge World reviews for you today. This time we're going to do the Seraptek Heavy Construct, which will be coming from the Imperial Armour Compendium book. Now we're going to be moving the shout out of the day to the end of the video, so stay tuned to see who's going to get that shout out. So let's move into the review. So the Seraptek Heavy Construct is a Lord of War model. It's coming in at 33 power level or 650 points. So it will of course cost you 1 command point because you're going to need to take a super auxiliary detachment, or if you were to take 3 Lord of War models then you could just take a super heavy detachment. At least then you can use the dynasty buffs, whereas with the super heavy auxiliary detachment you can't. So let's get on with the datasheet then, starting with the actual stats. It's got a movement of 12 inches, weapon skill 3+, ballistic skill 3+, strength 8, toughness 8, wounds 28, attack 6, leadership 10 and a 3+ save. So plenty of wounds, and along with that toughness 8, it's going to make it a very tanky model. But just bear in mind throughout the video that it's 650 points. That's a large chunk of change right there. Now it also does have a degrading stat line, as you would imagine, because it's got that many wounds. So once it's down to 14 wounds or less, it's going to lose some movement, a bit of weapon skill and ballistic skill. Then the same thing again will happen when it goes to 7 wounds or less. So the movement will drop to 6 inches and the weapon skill and ballistic skill will drop to a 5+. As for the war gear for the model, it is equipped with 2 singularity generators and the Titanic forelimbs. So let's get on with those. Starting with the singularity generators, so you've got 2 of these, bear in mind, both 36-inch range, heavy 3d3, so that's an average of 6 shots per generator, so that means you're going to be averaging 12 shots, and they're going to be strength 8, -3 AP, and the damage being d6, and it has the blast ability, which as you know by now, I'm not that keen on the blast ability, because once you get tagged in combat, you're not going to be firing it. But an average of 12 shots at strength 8 is pretty good, and you do have the potential of 18 shots. As for the Titanic forelimbs, which is a melee weapon, it's got 2 different profiles here. So the first one is strength ×2, making it strength 16. It's got -3 AP and the damage is a flat 5. Now the model actually has a base attack value of a 6. So 6 strength 16 shots, the hit on 3s. You should average 4 hits from that, and then you'll be wounding almost everything on a 2+. So you should hope for 3, maybe even 4 wounds from those hits with the impaling strike profile, and each one being damage 5. Now if you wanted to go against more infantry based units, then you can use the reaping sweep profile, which is strength user, making it strength 8, -1 AP and the damage is 2, and you're going to be having 2 hit rolls for each single attack. So that basically means you're going to have 12 attacks, and it's still pretty good. I mean, strength 8 and 2 damage is still a very effective profile to be using, especially against those space marines. So melee is particularly deadly. Now there is an upgrade option within this construct, which is you can swap out the 2 singularity generators and you're going to be replacing them with 2 synaptic obliterators and 2 transdimensional projectors. So you're actually getting 4 weapons and you're replacing them with only 2. So let's go through the actual weapons you're going to get instead. It's a free upgrade, by the way. So the first one, which is the synaptic obliterator, you're getting 2 of these. They're both 72-inch range now, so a big range there. Heavy D3, so you're going to be averaging 4 shots with the 2. And then they're both strength 16, -4 AP, and the damage is a flat 6. So no messing around with a D6 damage roll, it's just a flat 6. Very similar to the Annihilation Beam with the Silent King's Menhirs, but with an average of 4 shots, wounded on 2s. Once all said is done, you're probably going to get 3 wounds through. With that -4 AP, you're putting them on invuns or a 6+ armor save at best, and then damage 6 is going to be brutal. So you want to be using this as an anti-tank weapon. You don't really want to waste this on regular infantry models, possibly Death Guard Terminators at a push, because they're 3 wound models and it's a -1 to the damage with those guys. Really you want to be focusing on other vehicles, other dreadnoughts, other monsters and other Lord of War models. Then you get 2 transdimensional projectors. Now these are only 24-inch range, so they're short range here. Heavy D6, so an average of 7 shots in total with the 2 projectors. These are strength 6, -2 AP, damage 1 with the blast ability. Again, that dreaded blast ability rears its ugly head. In combat, you're not going to be able to fire this thing. But this is an anti-horde weapon. You should be going against toughness 3 models with this, because you'll be wounding them on 2s with that strength 6 weapon. -2 AP is all you really need to either be removing the save or putting them on what's quite likely nowadays a 6+ invuln save. I'm looking at the Sisters of Battle there. Then the damage 1 is plenty. So I personally quite like the upgraded option of having the 2 synaptic obliterators and the 2 transdimensional projectors, but the generators are obviously a very good option as well. So let's move down the datasheet. Let's get on to the abilities. We've got Living Metal, of course, to regain a lost wound at the start of the turn, which is pretty decent because it's got a degrading stat line. It could always be bumped up with Living Metal, and Command Protocols as well if you're within 6 inches of a character and you've got a Noble on the table to be using directives. Some of them are useful, some of them not so much. They are a little bit random if you're not planning them correctly. As you know, I'm not a big fan of them, but a lot of people get a lot of joy out of them. It's then got a containment field, which is actually a 5+ invulnerable save, so it doesn't quite match the Canoptic Doomstalker's 4+ containment field save, and it also doesn't match the Quantum Shield save either. I mean, it is still a 5+ invulnerable, but you can wound this on less than a 4+. It does explode, and this time it's on a 5+ rather than a 6+, and enemy units within 2d6 will suffer d6 mortal wounds, so a fairly large explosion there with a potential of 12-inch radius. It's Titanic, which gives it the eligibility to declare a charge even though it fell back. It can also move across other models, excluding monsters and vehicles as if they were not there, so it's quite similar to Fly, except you can't go over monsters and vehicles, but obviously you can't end up in engagement range of other enemy units. Then finally, going over those faction keywords, it has the Dynasty keyword, although it can't actually use any of the Dynasty buffs if you're taking that super heavy auxiliary detachment which we mentioned at the start of the video. However, you still have access to the Dynasty specific stratagem because it has the keyword. It's also a vehicle, it's Titanic, and of course it's a Seraptek heavy construct. So let's go on to the stratagems that are available for the construct. You've got the Stellar Alignment Protocol, which is going to be 2 command points because it's Titanic. Then in the command phase, you select a vehicle that's got a wounds characteristic of 10 or more, and it's going to be considered to have full wounds remaining for the purposes of determining its characteristics of the profile. So if it's been bracketed to maybe its lowest bracket, you pop the stratagem for 2 command points to still give it a ballistic skill value of a 3+, a weapon skill value of a 3+, and it's still moving at 12 inches of course as well. Then you've got Curse of the Pharaoh, which again is going to be expensive because it's Titanic. It's 3 command points. If you explode, you don't need to roll for it, it just auto explodes. Now there is a 1 in 3 chance of you actually exploding anyway because it's a 5+ roll this time, not a 6+, but this one will remove the chance of you actually failing that roll, especially if you've got lots of enemy models surrounding this construct. Then I wanted to mention one of the Dynasty specific stratagems that actually will work with this model, which is from the Seraptek code, which is the Methodological Destruction. It's 2 command points. After a Seraptek unit in the army has finished making its range attacks, you select an enemy unit that was targeted by an attack made by that model in the phase, and then until the end of that phase, anybody in the army for the Seraptek dynasty that attacks that enemy unit can add +1 to their hit rolls. All you would need is one single Seraptek warrior to fire at a certain unit. For example, it could be one of the Imperial Knights. That warrior targets it, doesn't even need to hit, and then from that point onwards, every Seraptek unit in your army gets that +1 to hits, which means this construct will be hitting that target on a 2+. Now with all those weapons that we mentioned earlier, that could be absolutely devastating if you're the opposing player. So if you are playing Seraptek, keep that one up your sleeve because it's going to really do some damage. As for some synergy, there's not really much in terms of the codex. There is a few little things though that we will go over. The first one being the Technomancer using the Canoptic Cloak, giving the bearer a move characteristic of a 10 inches and the Fly keyword, and it can be healing a Dynasty model within 3 inches up to D3 lost wounds every turn. Which is why it's important that the actual construct has the Dynasty faction keyword so that this is actually doable. And of course this is going to be helping because of that bracketed profile, as well as living metal on top of this. It hopefully should keep him at his top bracket. Another way of doing this would be to use a Canoptic Spider with the Fabrication Claw Array for 5 points. This spider can heal a Dynasty vehicle model within 3 inches up to D3 lost wounds at the start of the turn. So very similar abilities there, just from a different unit. Now if you get your Chronomancer out, get the Chronometron ability out. Now the actual 5+ invulnerable save that he grants your unit isn't going to have any use whatsoever because you've got a containment field. However, he does let you have rerolls to your charge rolls because he's a Dynasty unit. Then finally, if you want to use the Tryout Stalker for the targeting relay, get him to reroll hit rolls of a 1 once you've made a hit roll with the Tryout Stalker against the enemy unit. Now this pairs really well with that Seraptek stratagem that we mentioned earlier. If you get a warrior to hit the same unit as the Tryout Stalker, then fire with the construct, you're going to be hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s. So before we get onto the ratings today, I wanted to do a little bit of a comparison with a couple of units within the codex that have a sort of similar role in the battlefield. Now the first one is the Doomsday Ark. So I've got a little comparison table here. So for 650 points you're getting the heavy construct, whereas you can get 3 Doomsday Arks for 510 points, so you're still pocketing 140 points of change there. Now you could opt for 4, but I've just gone with 3 here because it's nice and simple. So in terms of the actual wounds, the Doomsday Arks, all 3 of them have a combined total of 42 wounds, whereas the heavy construct only has 28. As for their defense, of course the Doomsday Ark have the quantum shielding, so it's a 5+ invulnerable save which will match the heavy construct's invulnerable save, but the Doomsday Arks cannot be wounded on less than a 4+. So that gives them the green light there. As for the ranged attacks, the Doomsday Arcs have got 3 times D6 strength 10 weapons at -5 AP and the damage being D6 a piece, with the blast ability, which I don't like. Then of course you get the Gorse Flare shots. There's 30 of those when you've got 3 of these Doomsday Arcs. Strength 4, -1 AP, 1 damage. So this going up against the Heavy Constructs, 2d3, strength 16, -4 AP, and the damage is a flat 6. As well as the 2d6, strength 6, -2 AP with 1 damage and the blast ability. Now that's if you did the upgraded option. That's the one I actually preferred, so I put that there. But in terms of actual average damage output, the Doomsday Arc's damage output is much better. As for the melee side of things, this is where the Doomsday Arc crumbles a little bit. It's only got weapon skill value of a 6+. It's not really doing anything in melee whatsoever. Whereas the Construct is actually pretty brutal, as we've already seen in the weapon section of the video. You can either do 6 attacks at strength 16 or 12 attacks at strength 8, so it's easily getting the green light on that one. As for some miscellaneous things, you've got the fact that the Doomsday Arc can take the Dynasty buffs, whereas if you're using the Construct in a super heavy auxiliary detachment, you're not getting any Dynasty buffs, you're not getting the Mefrit code, you're not getting the Zerakin code for the reroll to the wound rolls, none of that stuff, unless of course you're taking a super heavy detachment as opposed to a super heavy auxiliary detachment. Another negative point for the Doomsday Arc, it needs to remain stationary to use its best profile, which is strength 10, whereas the Heavy Construct doesn't, and the Doomsday Arc's best weapon has the blast ability, which I don't like, whereas the strength 16 range weapon on the Construct is not a blast weapon, so it can actually be fired if it's within combat, which is pretty good. Then finally, as we already mentioned, the Doomsday Arc is a heavy support option, whereas the Construct is not a heavy support option, it's a Lord of War option, which requires a super auxiliary detachment, which costs you 1 command point. But overall, if you're looking at all the green lights here, it is pretty even. There's 6 green points to each side here. However, the Doomsday Arc option is only 510 points, so it's 140 points less. You've got 3 models there, which can be spread out, holding 3 different objectives. So for me, it's a clear winner. Now I also want to compare this to the monolith. Now you'd actually take 2 monoliths for 720 points. 1 monolith is only 360, so that's the nearest we can get there. So that's of course going to be a lot more expensive. You know, you're very unlikely to be taking 2 monoliths if I'm honest, but this is just hypothetically speaking. So in terms of the wounds, it's going to have 48 wounds with the 2 monoliths as opposed to 28. There's a big tick there. Now in terms of its defense, it's only got a toughness 8 where there's no quantum shielding, there's no invuln save, where of course the Heavy Construct has that toughness 8 but it also has the 5+ invuln save. But of course with 20 wounds less, it does make you wonder whether the actual monolith needs it or not. As for the range attacks, the monolith wins this one as well. 8 strength 9 shots at -3 AP and the damage being D3 +3, that's with the death rays. And you also get the particle whip, 2 lots of d6, strength 12, -3 AP, and the damage is a flat 3, but it's blast. So that on average actually does a lot more damage than the Heavy Construct. As for the melee side of it, this is where the Construct was beating the Doomsday Arc. This time it doesn't. I mean, the Portal of Exile, because there's 2 monoliths, there's 12 auto hitting attacks at strength 8, -3 AP, and a flat 3 damage. It's going to do so much more damage. And when I did the maths, I did it against a toughness 7 vehicle with no invuln save. It was doing about 20 damage on average there. So onto the miscellaneous side of things, both of these are going to go in a super heavy auxiliary detachment quite likely. So neither of them are going to get the Dynasty buffs. Now the monolith weapons are only mid-range, whereas the actual Heavy Constructs are quite long-range, so that's going to get a point for that. Then the monolith has the synergy with core infantry, bringing it out through its portal, and you've also got that stratagem to do that too. Whereas the Heavy Construct doesn't really have much other synergy other than the Technomancer and the Canoptic Spider, but all vehicles and Dynasty models have that same synergy, so I can't really count that. Then finally, the monolith can deep strike, whereas the Heavy Construct can't, so it gives you a little bit more of flexibility in your deployment. So again, I probably wouldn't favour the Seraptek Heavy Construct in this occasion, and the monolith isn't exactly a top tier unit within our Necron Codex. So let's get on with the summary then, starting with the good. It's pretty speedy at 12 inches, it's quite surprising being such a heavy model with that amount of wounds and that tough, but still 12 inches of movement. 28 wounds as well is quite a lot to get through, especially when it's toughness 8 and it's got a 5+ invulnerable save. That's going to be a very tanky unit to shift. It carries high strength and high damage weapons, which is obviously a scare for any army. They've got to deal with it, otherwise they're just going to get blown off the table. And it shoots and fights pretty well, so there's no real weakness. You can't just go up to it, melee it, tie it in combat, because it'll just slice you up. But the weapon option for its versatility, which I quite like the weapon option upgrades as opposed to the generator weapon. I think I'd always swap those ones out. And the melee weapon also has 2 profiles, so that's going to give you a bit of flexibility, whether you're using it for anti-tank or going against infantry. You've got the option of both. Then finally, because it's got the Titanic keyword, it can fall back and still charge. As for the bad, it's 650 points, and it's also a command point because it's a Lord of War model if you're using the super heavy auxiliary detachment. So it's just way too expensive. It's got the degrading stat line because it's got 10 wounds or more. That's quite standard. It's got no quantum shielding, so even though it's got the 5+ invulnerable save, you can wound it on less than a 4+ if you've got a strength 9 or more weapon. Going back to that invuln save, the containment field is meant to be a 4+, so maybe it's just not been updated, I'm not sure, but for some reason this one doesn't match the Doomstalker's containment build there. You're not going to get any dynasty buffs for using that super heavy auxiliary detachment, and that's obviously including the custom codes as well if you wanted to use those. And then the final point here, I've just put there's other options that are clearly better picks. Now we only picked out 2, and we picked out 2 fairly big ones there with the Doomsday Arc and the Monoliths, but even if you went with the smaller stuff, just think how many heavy Locust Destroyers you can get for 650 points. So before we do the rating, we've got to remember that there's a shout out of the day which needs to be done. It's going to go to Jacob Hampshire for his comment relating to the Canoptic Acanthrites. So shout out to you, Jacob. As for the rating, so at first it does look like quite a scary unit with all the punch it has, the firepower it has, the 28 wounds and the invuln save. But when you've got other units that are in the codex that are just better than this one, it just makes you think the star rating needs to come down a bit. So for that purpose alone, I'm going to be giving the Seraptek Heavy Construct Planet 40k rating of 2 stars. Do you agree with the rating? Let me know below. Also remember to subscribe and like the video if you found it useful. And we're also going to leave a link at the end of the video for the Monolith review. So if you haven't seen that one yet, the link should be there on the screen right now for you. Click that, check the Monolith out, and let me know if you also agree with that rating. So thanks for watching guys, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.